Hi, I'm Ray Billings. I'm the captain of Team Hardcore Robotics. I'm the builder and driver of the BattleBot Tombstone, which is your 2016 BattleBots champion. Yay. I've got some great questions here that have been sent to me, and so I'm going to answer those. All right. How long does it take to make a simple robot? What about a complex one? Um, in robotics, there are a lot of times you can buy kits that you can put together, and some of those can be put together in an afternoon. So there are some that can be put together fairly quickly. Most of your combat robots of the size that we compete with will take anywhere from a couple of months to 6 months, something like that, to build. So it just depends on how complex your design really is. Can robots get to the point where they learn by themselves? There's been a lot of advancements in artificial intelligence. We're not there yet, but I think we're probably going to get there. Things just continue to move forward fairly quickly, and it wouldn't surprise me if you see more and more of that type of learning capability in the next 10, 20 years. Can your robots hack another robot? No, my robots are actually pretty dumb. Most combat robots don't have a whole lot of onboard programming because the idea is to make them as simple as possible so that they would survive well in combat. And so there isn't a whole lot of actual onboard processing or thinking in a combat robot. Do you need to use a remote for every creation? In combat robotics, yes, you actually have to have a remote. It's part of the rules. So you need to be able to, even if you have an autonomous robot, one that does all of its controls by itself, it still has to be able to shut off remotely. So all combat robots have a remote. Does your robot need Wi-Fi to control them specifically? No, Wi-Fi is actually too flooded and too slow for robot control. Most robot controls these days are usually 2.4 gigahertz. They're very similar to what model airplanes and things of that nature use. So it's mostly off-the-shelf stuff. It's not things that we specifically have to design, but it's not Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi's got too many things on it that would make it harder to control. What parts do you use for the BattleBot? Are all of these parts metal? Is there a way to make a robot's break-proof? Boy, I sure wish there was a way you could make them where they couldn't break. Combat robots, most of the structure on them tends to be metal. There are some guys that have used some carbon fiber. A lot of guys have used plastic in various different ways. So there's a lot of different materials that you end up using in combat robotics. Some of the more common stuff is various different grades of high-grade steel. AR400 is abrasion-resistant 400. It's a very tough material. Various types of chrome moly steel because it's both strong and flexible. Titanium is commonly used in armor. Aluminum has a high strength-to-weight ratio, so a lot of frames are made from aluminum. You really end up learning a lot about metallurgy in general working with combat robotics. Can people buy your creations? No, I don't sell anything. I have a job. I already do stuff away from combat robotics for a living, and so I don't do any of this to make money on it. It's a hobby. It's for fun. How do people create robots? Do they already have the material, or do they order the parts? I would say it's probably a little of both. You tend to try to use the material you have on hand, but anytime you're going to design and build something new, you're going to be ordering parts. There's a lot of industrial suppliers online that I use routinely that buy metal and parts from. And then there are other companies that make parts that are more specific to combat robots, things that will make motors and gearboxes and things of that nature. How much money does it take to build a BattleBot? All of it. However much you have, that's how much you're going to spend. Most of the BattleBots that you see competing on the show were probably between $10,000 and $15,000 to build. You could probably build something relatively competitive in the $5,000 range. And on the upper end of that, there's a couple of them I know that were probably more like $100,000 to build. So a lot of it just depends on what your budget is and how much of the work you can do yourself versus sending out. If you're making somebody else machine all your parts, your costs go up quite a bit. In battles, do your robots malfunction sometimes? Unfortunately, yes. That's part of the nature of the sport, is you're trying to get the other robot to malfunction. Well, so they're trying to get your robot to malfunction too. So, sometimes just from the big hits and them getting beat around, you'll have things internally that will break. So a receiver will quit working, or a battery will break, things of that nature. And so it's a nature of combat. Things are going to break. It just happens. How do you test your bots to make sure they don't break? Most of it tends to be trial and error in the arena. So I'll build a robot, I'll take it to an event, and I'll see whatever breaks at that particular event, and I'll try to design that part stronger for next time. And so every event you go to, you learn a little bit more, and you tend to make them a little bit tougher. And the rest of the competition is doing the same thing too. So things that work perfectly fine 5 years ago might not work now because the robots are so much stronger and tougher. So it's a constant evolving process. You're always trying to fix things to where they're a little tougher and they don't break. Is there a certain limit of what you should have on your robots? There's actually a long list of rules that you have to comply with. And in that, there are things that are not allowed. So you can't use depleted uranium as armor, for example. You can have onboard fuel for the flame effects weapons, but you can only have so much. It's limited. You can't have as much as you want. There's a lot of different rules that state what you can and can't have on your robot. And so the first thing about any game you want to play, including combat robotics, is to read the rules. You need to understand what's an option, what it isn't. How do robots actually get the technology to move and do all the stuff they can do? A lot of this stuff has been around for a long time. So the basic control mechanisms for a combat robot are usually an RC plane control. So you already have an off-the-shelf communication system. You have to design speed controllers that can handle the amount of power that a combat robot needs, and then connect them up to motors that are strong enough to move it around. And so a lot of it isn't necessarily redesigning new things. It's trying to figure out what already existing technology is out there that you can make work in a combat robot. And to me, that's half the fun, is trying to figure out, okay, well, can I make this work? Can I make that work? That's part of the entertaining part of the sport, to me. How many lines of code does it take to make a complex robot? For some of your non-combat type robotics, FIRST is a good example. They have a lot of onboard programming. So they'll have sensors that'll take in input, line followers, things of that nature. And so there is some actual coding that you need to learn in order to do that. Combat robotics in general don't have a lot of onboard programming. There are a few that do. Chomp from this season's a good example. It had an onboard LiDAR-based tracking system to be able to automatically fire its hammer at the right time. So I'm not saying that combat robots don't have them. None of mine do. Mine are all very simple and dumb. It's very just, I'm providing input on the transmitter, and the robot's doing what I tell it. There isn't any lines of code on mine at all. In the future, will BattleBots fight like real steel? Not without a major rule change, to be perfectly honest. A big walking robot like the ones in the movie Real Steel wouldn't stand a chance against a dedicated combat robot like Tombstone is today. I would cut him into pieces. So the reality there is, unless there's a major change in rules, you're probably not going to see that for a while. They are getting better about how they design some of the balancing systems, and it wouldn't surprise me if in the next few years we get to the point where the actual walking mechanisms of a robot like that could work. But making it walk and making it survive in combat are two separate things. So we'd kind of need its own special class, and even at that, I don't think the technology's quite there right now. But who knows what the future holds. I would love to see something like that. I think I'm like everybody else. I think it would be cool to watch. Okay, those are the questions. I hope you guys are having fun and learning lots about robotics, and you can contact me anytime. I'll try to answer any questions you may have. All right, thank you.